Okay, so I am Marielle Wells. I'm the content specialist at PyTop, and in this webinar, I'm going to give you tips, the tips that I have for grant writing of all my experience, right? So I've written some terrible ones, I've written some great ones, but it's all like a learning process, right? A little bit more about me. I have 8 years of teaching experience at the high school level, so secondary level. I taught engineering 1, engineering 2, physical science, and environmental science over the course of the 8 years. I have 6 years of experience training educators at both the district and state levels. And I had some opportunities to present at national conferences as well. My experience in writing grants spans actually all of my teaching career. My very first year, towards the end of the year, I wrote my very first one. Overall, I wrote 28 grant and donation requests, and those are a little bit different, 22 of which were awarded, and altogether, everything totaled well over $70,000. So a bit of throwback Thursday here. Those were the units, and that's one of my engineering classes that I had, one of my very first ones, actually. Okay, so where to start? The internet is vast and houses many grant opportunities. So when looking online, it's a good idea to start by searching for grants focused on topics dealing with your subject matter. Where else could you find grants? You can often find companies that accept grants annually, quarterly, or some that will have limited time opportunities, like, this is just a special one. They're trying to get rid of some money. They like to donate often. So consider your location. You can often find them from local industries around or in your school districts. So regardless of where you find a grant, always read over the guidelines and requirements first. Not every grant is for you, and some of the required information can be hard to obtain. So that's more planning and more work behind it. So this is a list of grant opportunities that you can explore. In that handout that Stephanie talked about, we're going to have links that you can actually click to see. But believe it or not, Target and Walmart even offer grant opportunities. I've gotten quite a bit of them from Walmart. Okay, so grants should be centered on the students and their learning. You're more likely to receive the grant if the purpose is student oriented. So some things to consider are how can it positively impact your students? What can help improve your students' academic achievement? Can your outcomes be measured? Is there an end goal? Does the purpose connect to the real world or even something in your community? Does it provide a chance to gain 21st century skills? So I have a big list of sample topic ideas that you could focus on. Real world applications, 21st century learning, STEM or STEAM, a lot of industry companies like that kind of stuff, robotics, maker spaces. I know some schools, the library has a maker space, but as an engineering teacher, I had my own. You can do community projects, technology, solutions to environmental problems, or, well, I'll get to it later, but things that impact people, right? Or will be beneficial to people, especially in your community if you're working with industry. Workforce readiness, so subject matter that will aid students in transitioning to a professional setting. That's maybe more for the older kids, middle and high. Challenge or inquiry-based learning, innovative use of technology and other tools for meaningful student learning and skills. And then you have interdisciplinary projects. Even English and social studies can incorporate STEM and STEAM, right? Okay, this is actually the very first grant that I wrote. Now that I look at it, it's not really the best, but it sounded good to them and they gave it to me, and that's what matters, right? So in your narrative, and that's what I'll call this, they'll ask for, some kind of purpose, narrative, proposal, goal, like you'll have to often write, a few paragraphs at least. Keywords are important. So you're going to want to include some buzzwords related to your proposal. Providing evidence in these makes it flashy. So use some numbers, statistics, quotes even to support the narrative. This also shows that you invested time into your proposal. But mainly you want to keep it professional, still get the point across quickly. Okay, so terminology matters. I have pulled these sentences from narratives that I have written in the past. You're going to want to use phrases sort of like these. So open-ended real-world challenges, problem solving and higher order thinking skills, creating a community environment for students, or positive environment, that kind of stuff. With high school students, it's always great to include something related to post-secondary choices and future careers. All right, so you found a grant. Let's talk about how to get started. Okay, so you'll start with an item list or budget. I did, because it was easier to write the grant if I knew what I wanted or needed. Shipping costs need to be included in the budget so that you have a correct final amount. You don't want to request, $5,000 and you forgot that shipping costs, because then you're going to have to figure out how to pay for that or get less of the items you wanted. Things for public schools should be tax exempt. The financial office at your school should have a tax ID number to use. But if you're ordering from a company that other people or you have previously ordered from, they're probably going to have this tax ID number on file. When you make a budget, like as soon as you're thinking about this grant, get some vendor quotes. So many businesses will honor the price you were given, even if it's months later. This is an issue that can arise when funds are sent at a later date, right? So I got quotes in December, but the funds didn't come and the ordering didn't happen until like May. The prices did change, but that company honored the quote, the prices that they sent on the quote. So it's quite nice. Ask your school content department. I don't know if you have consultants in your district, or the school board, to see if they have contracts with companies that you find, because they may have access to discounted items, right? They may have contracts. POs are the way to go if you're wanting costly equipment or training, high dollar things. You may be required to create an account with the company first. I found that it was easiest to get with my school's accounting department to help me out with that part. Another option in some districts is that you purchase the items yourself and then go through a reimbursement process. I don't know if everyone does that. Every school district does that, but you probably don't want to put $5,000 on your card. Go with a PO in that case. But check that stuff out for your district. Okay, talking about districts, it's a good idea to find out the rules and processes regarding grants or funds, donations, where you are. So the district that I taught in, I used to teach, I'm in Louisiana, by the way, sorry. I used to teach almost to the coast at a school district in Calcasieu Parish. So there were specific rules that we had to follow. And these are some that were appropriate for there. Okay, so you'll need to find out the method in which the funds should be sent and where they should be deposited. Okay, so that you could have your own class account. There could be school accounts. There could be accounts at the district level. You'll need to find that out. And also, if you need to get like a check or if the funds should be transferred, figure that out first before you write a grant, because that might be something in the grant application you'll have to specify. Another rule was that all grants 10,000 and up had to be managed by the grant department. So they would actually make the purchases and the equipment would just come straight to the teacher. It always took longer, but all grants 50,000 and up must be approved by the district. They want a little bit more control when you're getting into high dollar things. Some districts may require recipients to submit a grant form to the grant department. That's fairly easy. We were supposed to do it before we wrote a grant, but I wrote so many, I just turned it in after I wrote the grant and got it. But they want it for their records. Apparently they kept files with the teachers and what grants they received. Okay, check on warranty rules. This particular district mandated that Apple Care was to be included with the purchase of all iPads. So you need to check that out first. Plan where to buy from. So some grant departments will not purchase from Amazon. They may have specific companies you have to use. Our district had a web page where they listed all the companies you could use. I probably shouldn't say this, but I always got annoyed with those limitations. So I tried to find grants that were outside of the district control. Okay, so they can request various things. Just like with your students, don't procrastinate. So just like you tell them, you want to stay ahead of your deadline. This is a list of documents that I've had to turn in. I didn't have to turn in all of them every single time. It just varies. The simple ones will usually request a short narrative and a budget, maybe a little bit of extra information. But the more complex grants are going to ask for things you probably need help obtaining. So for instance, some of the information such as the financial data and demographics, things that you have to dig for, like our mission statement at the school I was at was really hard to find, but these things take time to collect. Okay, you'll want to find a purpose. Think about what you hope to achieve and how the requested items will help you meet those goals. Your purpose needs to be clear and focused in the proposal. Cut out the fluff. A lot of teachers like to write all these fancy elaborate sentences, but they're often reading a lot of proposals and they want to know what you're asking for quickly. So every student or piece of information you include needs to pertain to what you choose to write about. Your goals should be realistic and attainable. If you write about a whole bunch of stuff and you can't fulfill that, you could run into problems when they ask for follow-ups. I'll get more into that later. Another thing I always try to remember is the long-term use of the project. So if you can get miles out of the equipment, it's going to be more beneficial and cost-effective for you, right? If you can use this thing every year and not have to, spend hundreds of dollars because you bought consumables that have to be replaced, it's better, right? You don't have to work as hard if you can continue to use it, or use it in other subjects as well if you teach multiple. Okay, so many of the grants and donations I received were written to acquire equipment and supplies with specific goals in mind. I wanted my students to create and continue creating 3D printed prosthetics for children in our community and in the surrounding areas. It happened with just one of them. I'm not going to get too far into the story, but it was an idea that my sister taught handwriting to one of these little boys, and he was missing some fingers, and she was talking about it. I was like, oh, we need to make him a prosthetic. Anyway, I had 3D printers, and it was a large undertaking, but it was very successful and impacted everyone involved. And so I kept writing more grants to continue doing these projects. So it got to the point where companies were directly contacting me because they wanted to support and give my programs money. They only asked that I work through the grant process to get the funds. So I was like, hey, we want to give you this money. We want to make a donation, but you need to fill out this stuff, which was fine. I also didn't plan it nor asked for it. I actually hated the press, but we did have a lot of press around the prosthetics. So if you have something awesome that you're doing with your kids, helping out in the community, you might want to consider inviting your district PR rep, news stations, and even the newspaper, and so that the amazing work your students do can be seen and it gets y'all out there, and you could make it to where companies are contacting you to give you money. Okay, the follow-up. So don't be surprised if donors request some type of follow-up. They may state what they want to see, but I've written grants where I had to determine what the follow-up consisted of. So which of course could be a deciding factor when it comes to approval, right? If I said, oh, we're going to do this, and they didn't like that, that could be thrown out, right? My proposal could be thrown out just from that. So what might this look like? Once you're awarded the grant, you may be required to complete a project summary, to schedule a day where the donors come visit and see what y'all have been doing. Create thank you notes signed by students. That was one I had to do a few times. Provide action pictures or videos, show database results, and so forth. So a takeaway is that it's important to think about and know the follow-up process before you get started, because these are things that could be, you could have to collect them over time, right? If you're doing action shots of projects and it took weeks, you're going to need to take pictures throughout that. Okay, student voices matter. So what if you have to create a presentation and meet with the donors, but the students are unable to be present? I had to do this once. I had to meet with them in the summer, and obviously there was no students. So for this, I strongly recommend adding student quotes. It makes the donation more meaningful when the company can understand the impact it had on the kids, because that's who it's about, right? It's not about you, unless it's training directly for you. But if they're given money, they want to see what it, how it's impacting everyone, especially those kids. So these quotes are from a few engineering students I taught in the past. I had asked them to reflect on their experiences after we gave some of the prosthetics to those wonderful kids who had the opportunity to help. It changed my students. It was great for the kids we have to work with. It was wonderful. We all felt lots of emotions when we got to help them. But I personally loved seeing the changes that happened in my students. And so some of them changed their career paths. Some of them got into other things because of it. There was a lot of confidence through the process. Anyway, so I don't want to get too into that, but it was amazing. So, okay. Final grant writing tips: be sure to follow all requirements, answer all questions, and stay within the guidelines, or your proposal can be discarded. It's a good idea to make a checklist for the more complex grants, and I have some I'll show you, so you don't miss anything. Know the rules. It's a bit surprising, but a proposal can be thrown out just for having too many words. Right? If they specify it, make sure you keep it in there. Or too little words. That's another way to have it thrown out. You'll want to have a few people proofread your proposal. Common things like checking spelling and grammar, those are necessary. But the reader should also see if your objectives and your purpose is clear. Remember, we don't want fluff. We want to know quickly what it's about and your goals. Keep copies of all the grants that you write, even the ones that you weren't awarded. I'll get into that. It's a really good idea to keep copies. I always kept digital copies, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? You can copy and paste, especially from the ones that you were awarded, but also the other ones. I mentioned that I wrote 28 grants and donation requests. More than a few of those were similar. So you don't want to turn the same grant every year to the same company, but if it's different companies, they don't know what you turned in when. So you just copy and paste, add a little bit more, change it up if you need to, but you don't have to start from scratch every time. Lastly, don't ever be discouraged if you don't receive the funding. Okay, I've seen grant opportunities where they only accept a percentage. So like 25 will go to high school, 25 middle school, 50 elementary, and it changes every year. Some donors are looking for topics that you might not have wrote about that time. the person or persons who approve the grant is a factor as well. This is just like teacher observations. Your results can differ depending on who is performing the evaluation and how they interpret that rubric, right? So don't be discouraged. Try again. If you don't get it, write a lot of them. You'll most likely get a few, and practice does help. Okay, so this is the application for the very first grant that I wrote. This was a grant opportunity a certain donor offered annually to all of the schools in our district. Luckily, I chose an easy one to start with. This was only 300 words. Their narrative required it be less, 300 words or less. And it also didn't request much in terms of information. And so like there was a cover sheet. We had to give information about ourselves and our school, the amount requested, budget, and then the narrative, which I had on another slide, and a little bit more information. The hardest part about this one was coming up with an idea and then actually getting it delivered to the grant department where we have to submit. And that's another thing. Pay attention to how you need to submit these things. Sometimes it's on paper, a lot of times it's digital. Okay, this is a sample budget, and that's for that very first grant that I wrote. I did include shipping. I had quotes. Sometimes you will have to also turn in the quotes. It just depends. Your accounting department might want them, even if the donors don't ask. Okay, this one I had to complete and submit in an online platform. So I would say more than half the time I was submitting the data online in some kind of platform where I had to make an account. For the sake of time and organization, I created a Word document outlining everything this application requested. I'll show you the rest of it. That way I could fill it out when I had time without having to log in, right? Or I can work on it offline. This ended up coming in handy because a document was easier to send to people for proofreading and feedback. And it allowed me to keep a personal record. I could repurpose the information for the other grants. And this company actually had me write another one the next year. Okay. So in addition to that general information I just showed, the company asked about the school board, other funding, budgets, number of employees, project info, dates, amounts, goals, geographic area, people served. They asked about school board of directors, like it was a lot. These are some more entries included on the application. So as you can see, some grants are quite complex. It took me more than a month to gather all the information I needed here, and I had to talk to at least 3 other people to help me out with it. So this one is the very last grant that I wrote. It was a quick write because the company wanted to give us money, but gave me a very short deadline to write the proposal. Basically, it was like, just get it in there and we'll send you the funds. But with the amount of funding that they donated, I was able to get 10 of every product that PyTop offered. So here's a little bit more of that one. We had to describe the population that would be served by the project, a bunch of demographic stuff, estimated number of people. So if you write a grant for a class of 30 kids, like it's just specifically for this class, say it's engineering, but you also teach science like I did, and you probably could use that equipment in those classes too, or maybe you have a teacher friend across down the hall or something that could use the stuff in their class. Think about all of that. It's not lying if you say it's all your students and all their students, or maybe the whole department. That's not lying if you do include those the number of students from everyone. Okay, so please outline the plans to publicize and recognize the support of the project if the grant were funded. That was one of the things, I had to tell them what we were going to do. and they actually never came or were involved anymore after they gave us the money. Okay, so this is a sample form that we were required to submit to the grant department in our district. That was the thing I talked about. We were supposed to submit it before we filled it out. But I wrote so many, so I often just filled it out after the fact. It was just for their records. I went a bit fast. Sorry, guys. So that's my presentation. And if there's any questions.
No one posted any questions while you were talking, but you can either raise your hand and I can unmute you if you want to ask a question, or you can put it in the chat. We'll give people a couple minutes just in case. And if not, all of this information that Marielle shared, again, is going to be available to you in a document. So you didn't have to memorize it. It was a lot of information.
Yeah, and I probably talked fast. Sorry about that.
No questions. Everybody's a grant writing expert now. Oh, let's see. Lucy's raised her hand. There you are, Lucy. I think we can hear you now.
Hi, thank you for this. I was curious. I am thinking about writing a grant for, I don't know if you heard of Dream Up, sending a science experiment to NASA. I mean,
Wow.
I'm sorry, ISS. So we have a team who's working on that. Now, they went through like multiple phases. So now we have a final team. But when I write the grant to fund that, can I just say, well, all of these kids who participated it, but then we have the final. So can I say I have actually, the final impact is gonna impact the final team, but just there was a process of, things like that. Do I include that? I think it might be better to just include everybody who participated in that very initial phase.
Yes, I would say yes. Also, if you plan on, I don't know what you're doing, but if you plan on doing it every year or at least the next year, you can also mention that as well. But I would include every kid that was involved in
Got it. And for something like that, what organizations should I tap into for like a space STEM? Like, is there, and we're looking for some kind of a big amount, like up to 12 grand or like 10 grand ish. Do you like recommend like certain organizations that I can tap into pretty easily
to purchase the things?
Well, so the reason why it's so expensive, but then the equipment is like really small, but it's a space thing. So yeah, so I mean, we already kind of purchased it, but we're doing like, okay, could you help us, because we're in the big, I mean, it's a big chunk of things, so it'll be so helpful if somebody can sponsor part of that.
Okay.
I think that you can do in those situations. Marielle, sorry, do you mind if I cut in?
No, go ahead.
So this actually ties into something that Marielle was talking about. And when I worked for a children's museum, we kind of dealt with this as well. One of the big things that you can do there is, depending on the specifics of what the project is, this is a really good example of tying that into industry specific grants. So you might have to get creative there, but if you think, like, how do the skills that these kids are learning apply to things within this industry? Or how are the things that we're using related to a specific industry? Start thinking about those related industries and then look for grants in that space. Those are very often, depending on the industry, you can find more grant money there than you can from government organizations or nonprofits. And so if you can tie it thematically, the things that you're doing, into an industry and choose that as a narrowed focused area for the grant writing requests, this is probably one of those specific instances where that would be really beneficial.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a local industry, I think they made paint and stuff, and some other things, but they were like, hey, we're going to give you $15,000 to get robotic stuff. So they're interested and they want to promote, things. You just, sometimes you have to reach out. Sometimes it falls into your lap, but we will have that list of grant opportunities that I showed earlier, we're going to have that in the handout for y'all, and you should be able to click on the links to explore those things. I tried to put a ton of them in there, like
Awesome.
even like Honda and stuff offers grant opportunities. Like it's yeah.
Cool.
Walmart's an easy one if it's community focused.
Okay. Now, when will I get the so would that be emailed to us if we participated today?
Yes, we will email it to you. The goal is to email it to you by Monday. We have a few additional links that we want to add tomorrow before we send it out, so you get the complete information. So we will have that emailed to you by Monday at the latest.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. Does anybody else have any questions?
If you think of them later, you can email us too.
Yeah,
I also
absolutely.
don't mind if you are like, I can't write this proposal, I don't know what I'm doing. I'll look at it for you and maybe give you some tips. Federal grants, library grant, and I want to include a makerspace area. Federal grants, they're probably going to ask for a lot of data. Make sure you look at that application really early. I don't know if you have a place that you're considering. But makerspace, those are easy to write grants on. You can connect it to the professional world and real world situations and solutions, that kind of stuff. Any more questions?
So Marielle's email address is here at the bottom of the screen if you want to write it down. And like she said, she is happy to answer additional questions. We'll go ahead and get this sent out. We'll have this saved on pytop.com. If you go to the education section, you can go to our webinars page. We have webinars every 2 weeks like this, not necessarily just about PyTop, but about informational things that can help you in your day-to-day teaching. So feel free to go and look. And again, if you want to rewatch this or tell somebody else to watch it, if somebody else is interested, and we can, of course, go ahead and send that document to them as well. So if nobody has anything else, we can go ahead and call it.
Eli's webinars next week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. By the way.
Great.
welcome.
Thank you
Stay
all
tuned.
so much. Yeah. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.